हरिः ओम् नमः सर्वेभ्यः। अष्टाध्यायी परिचयः इत्यस्य अद्य चतुर्विंशः पाठः। अस्मिन् वर्गे प्रक्रियासु याः संज्ञाः मुख्यरूपेण प्रयोक्तुं शक्याः प्रयुज्यन्ते वा तासां सूत्रैः सह अध्ययनं कुर्मः। शुक्लाम्बरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। येनाक्षरसमाम्नायमधिगम्य महेश्वरात् कृत्स्नं व्याकरणं प्रोक्तं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। वाक्यकारं वरर्षिं भाष्यकारं पतञ्जलिं पाणिनिं सूत्रकारं च प्रणतोऽस्मि मुनित्रयम्। अस्माकं वर्गस्य द्वे प्रयोजने अष्टाध्याय्याः आहत्य चतुश्शतस्य सूत्राणां व्याख्यासहितम् उदाहरणसहितं च अध्ययनम्। अष्टाध्याय्याः प्रथमाध्यायस्य प्रथमपादस्य कण्ठस्थीकरणम्। अस्माकं वर्गस्य तृतीयं प्रकरणं प्रचलत् अस्ति। तत्र संज्ञापरिभाषम् इत्यस्मिन् अस्मिन् प्रकरणे संज्ञासूत्राणाम् अध्ययनम् इदानीं क्रियमाणं वर्तते। ह्यस्तनवर्गे अस्माभिः सवर्णसंज्ञायाः सन्दर्भेण अध्ययनं कृतम्। अद्य अग्रे सरामः। अद्यतनविषयः अस्ति प्रक्रियालेखने याः विशिष्टाः संज्ञाः भिन्नैः सूत्रैः उक्ताः सन्ति तासां सर्वासाम् अद्य अध्ययनं कुर्मः। So we have actually studied two full classes, class number 9 and class number 10, specifically detailing out various aspects of prakriya. So the concepts that we learned in those classes, we are essentially going to understand through the sutras and probably along with the shastra vishaya in today's class. So atra asmabhi prayena 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 dasha sutrani अधीयानि सन्ति, पठ्यमानानि वर्तन्ते। प्रत्ययः इत्यनेन प्रत्ययसंज्ञा दीयते. So an important samnya that we are going to learn is the pratyaya samnya. Then there is the dhatu samnya and the pratipadika samnya and the pada samnya. All these I think are already taught. We all know this. The next samnya is important, anga samnya, and then there is a lopa samnya and the vibhakti samnya. So all these samnyas are typically used in different steps of prakriya, and let's look at them one by one. So let us start. The very first samnya that we are going to see is the pratyaya samnya. तत्र सूत्रमस्ति तृतीयाध्यायस्य प्रथमपादस्य प्रथमं सूत्रं. So 3.1.1 प्रत्ययः. So आ पंचमाध्याय परिसमाप्तेः प्रत्यय संज्ञा वेदितव्या. So pratyayah, which is the very first sutra of 3.1. So chapter 3 starts with the pratyayah. There is no uddesham over here. It is just one term, and that is the samnya that is being given. And the reason why uddesham is not given is because this pratyaya is actually an adhikara sutra. Everything that is taught in this particular adhikara is a pratyaya. So this is a samnya sutra as well as an adhikara sutra. Asya vyaptihi panchamadhyayasya samaptim yavad vartate. So the central three adhyayas purely pratyayas are listed. अस्मिन् अधिकारे उक्ताः शब्दाः प्रत्ययसंज्ञकाः भवन्ति इति अस्य अधिकारसूत्रस्य नो चेत् संज्ञासूत्रस्य आशयः. Now please understand, this is a general statement. So we say this is a representative explanation or upalakshanartham. Why? Because in the pratyayadhikara, not every word that is being told is a pratyaya. That's obvious. I mean, for example, their next is sutra is called parascha. It is called adyudatascha. Next sutra has the word called anudatta and so on. So not each and every word is a pratyaya over here. There are other entities also. So idam kevalam upalakshanartham asti. Asmin adhikare kechana adeshaha santi, kechana agamaha santi. So whenever a pratyay is being told or an adesha is being told, you need to tell who is the sthani, who is the agami, and so on. Sometimes a pratyaya nishedha is also being told. The adesha nishedha is being told. So anyapi vishayaha uktaha santi. However, the central theme, if you zoom out, what is one word that will describe the crux of these three adhyayas? It is the pratyaya. So we say idam pratyaya adhikara sutram asmin adhikare pratyayanam vidhanam bhavati. So here are some examples. Guptichkibhyas san. This is an example from 3.1. One of the first pratyayas that you will come across. So pratyayah, parascha, adhyadatascha, anudattau, suppitau. These are not actually listing any pratyayas as such. The very first pratyaya that you will come across in this adhikara is this guptich kidbhya san. So san is the first pratyaya. Guptich kidbhya san ityatra san iti pratyaya asti. Then if you enter 4.1 after the entire chapter 3 is over, ajadyatastap ityatra tap iti pratyaya asti. All the way towards the end, the very last pratyaya that is told in this entire adhikara is 54151 uraf prabhritibhyah kap इत्यत्र कप इति प्रत्ययः उक्तः अस्ति. अनेन प्रकारेण भिन्नाः भिन्नाः प्रत्ययाः अत्र अस्मिन् अधिकारे उक्ताः सन्ति. There are 7 types of pratyayas. I have shown the diagram and so on. Their count and so on is already being taught in class number 9 and 10. You should go back and revise that. प्रयोगः प्रत्ययप्रदेशः प्रत्ययलोपे प्रत्ययलक्षणम् इत्येवम् आदयः. So that's all about the pratyaya samnya. The next samnya that we are going to learn is the dhatu samnya. And again, we have actually studied all the necessary material in one of the previous classes. So Paniniya Vyakarane dviprakarakaha dhatavaha santi. You have avyutpannaha dhatavaha, which are further classified into aupadeshika dhatavaha or sautra dhatavaha. The dhatus that are present in the dhatu patha, bhu sattayam, edha vruddho, and so on, are aupadeshika dhatavaha. And the dhatus that are only seen in the sutras are sautra dhatavaha. Then there are vyutpanna dhatavas, which is also called atideshika dhatus or sanadyanta dhatus. They are actually created by adding a sanadi pratyaya either to a pratipadika, that is a subanta technically, or to a dhatu. So you have subanta padam plus sanadi pratyaya, the sub component gets removed. So essentially it is pratipadikam plus sanadi pratyaya, or it is dhatu plus sanadi pratyaya. This slide is copied as it is from, I think, class number 9 or 10. So nothing new over here. What we are going to study right now is the sutras that give avyutpanna dhatus and the vyutpanna dhatus. So there are 2 sutras in Ashtadhyayi. One gives avyutpanna dhatus and other gives the sanadyanta dhatus or the vyutpanna dhatus. So the sutra that teaches avyutpanna dhatus, the first sutra of 1.3.1 Bhuvadayo dhatavaha. So let's go to this 1.3.1. This is Bhuvadayo dhatavaha. What does sutra mean? Kriyavachinaha bhu ityadayaha dhatu samnyaha syuhu. So bhu and others. Essentially, it is just like a gana reference. It is a reference to the dhatu patha. By the word bhu, the entire dhatu patha is indirectly being indicated. So all these words which are indicated, collected in dhatu patha as a separate entity are dhatu samyakas. So the padacheda bhuvadayaha, bhuvadi, tasya adi is the word over there, tasya bahuvachanam adayaha, dhatavaha, prathama bahuvachanam. The uddesham or the samni is bhuvadayaha. All those dhatus are already given to you as a book that is told to you, and they are being called dhatus. So bhu, edha, spardha, and so on. These are uddeshas. The samnya vidheyam is the dhatuhu or dhatavaha. So what is bhuvadayaha? It is bhu and others. Bhu, edha, vruddha, and so on. Bhu, edha, ityadaya shabdaha ye dhatu pathaha ityakhye granthe sankalitaha santi te sarve anena sutrena dhatu samyakaha bhavanti iti ashayaha. Now the point over here is bhu and so on. If you just take the word bhu, it actually has 2 meanings. Bhu as a standalone word can actually mean earth, Prithvi. And then there is a bhu, dhatu, which means to do or to exist, not to do, to exist, to be, and so on. Say Ramaha bhavati, to exist, and so on. So bhu ityadayah shabdaha tesham bhinnaha arthaha bhavitum arhanti. Parantu ete shabdaha yada क्रियावाचके अर्थे प्रयुज्यन्ते tada eva te dhatu samyakaha bhavanti. So these words are called dhatus only when they are used in the meaning of an action. Kriya vachake arthe. So bhu is not called dhatu when it is used to indicate prithvi, like om bhuhu bhuva swaha and so on. So all this only kriyavachaka artha is used for calling them dhatu, and etat sarvam sutre uktam nasti. If you just see the sutra, it is bhuvadayo dhatavah. भुवादय क्रियावाचकाः धातवः इति सूत्रे नास्ति, परन्तु इदं भुवादय परन्तु अत्र भूवादयः इति शब्देन अत्र क्रियावाचकत्वम् एव ग्राह्यम् इति अत्र व्याख्यानात् स्पष्टीभवति. In this context, Kashikakara explains in further details, dhatu iti shabdaha purvacharya samnya. So the word dhatu is not coined by Panini. The word dhatu was used before Panini in the meaning of verbs indicating an action. So in the same meaning, Panini just uses it from the purvacharyas. So dhatu shabdaha purvacharya samnya. Te ityukte purvacharyaha kriyavachananam samyam krutavantah. So as an inherited samya from the parampara, Panini Maharshi knew that this samya is only used to indicate kriyavachakatva, and therefore iha api purvacharya samya shrayanat क्रियावाचिनाम एव भूवादीनाम धातु संज्ञा विधीयते. अतएव भू इति शब्दः पृथिवी इत्यस्मिन् अर्थे धातु संज्ञकः नास्ति, परन्तु सत्ता इत्यस्मिन् अर्थे धातु संज्ञकः अवश्यम अस्ति. सत्ता means to exist, that is called satta. So that's why the meaning in the dhatu patha is also bhu sattayam. So satta इत्यस्मिन् अर्थे धातु संज्ञकः अवश्यम ज्ञेयः. धातु प्रदेशाः धातोः इत्येवम् आदयः. विद्याजी.
नमस्कारः महोदय. तत्र अस्मिन् सन्दर्भे उच्यते वा इति न जानामि, परन्तु भूधन आदयः इति अस्ति चेत् वादयः इति न भवति वा? वादयः.
करेक्ट. सो सूत्रे वकारः किमर्थं प्रयुक्तः? भू प्लस आदयः भ्वादयः इति कुतो न? एनीबडी वांट्स टू आंसर? Okay, so that's a very appropriate and logical question, and I'm happy somebody asked it. So sutre vakaraha kimartham prayuktaha bhu plus adayah bhwadayah iti kuto na. So obviously, first point to understand is what Panini had in mind we don't know. We don't have a direct reference from the source. But then there are multiple interpretations. So Bhashyakara gives a particular interpretation, one particular reason why that weird sandhi is happening. Then there are some other explanations why this particular sandhi is done in this way. So we are going to learn all these explanations. We are going to learn all these ways of explaining what this weird sandhi has happened. But the first thing I want you to understand is that this is all speculation. We don't have any direct word from Panini Maharshi. By the way, we don't have direct word from Panini Maharshi on any of the 4,000 sutras. So even the meaning of Vruddhi Radhaj is clear from the Vyakhyanas. But it fits, it looks very logical when you read the Vyakhyanas. Here, it's not exactly that logical. A little bit of extrapolation here and there is done. But I'll explain what the commentaries are here to offer. Purnima Bhagini, you want to say something?
Namaskaram Mahodaya. Just wanted to say what I felt like guessing what it could have been done there. So bhu might have become bho, like it's guna sanya. Then bhu plus adayah, avadesha sandhi has happened like that.
But that will be bhavadayah. Bho plus adaya equals bhavadaya. Here we have bhuvadaya. Okay? That's a good try. Anybody else wants to? I have some time today. The class is not going to get that elongated. So we can stretch it if people want to discuss. Anybody else wants to make a guess? It's very weird. It's very remote. I don't think you would expect what Mahabhashyakara says over here. So Bhashyakara says, Kutoyam vakaraha. Why that va particle is being inserted? So it is bhu plus va plus adayaha. That va is being inserted extra. Kutoyam vakaraha. And he says, Yadi tavat samhitaya nirdeshah kriyate. If you want to combine bhu and adayaha, bhwadayaha iti bhavitavyam. And if you want to explicitly put bhu as separate, in quotes, bhu adayaha, then you will simply say bhu adayaha. So samhitaya nirdeshah kriyate ched bhuadayaha iti bhavitavyam, asamhitaya bhu adayaha iti bhavitavyam, atha uttaram pathati. Here is the answer. Bhuadinam vakaroyam mangalarthaha prayujyate. The vakara has been inserted in the Bhuvadaya Dhatavaha Sutra as a Mangalacharanam. Mangalarthaha prayujyate. Now, what nonsense is this? Why do you need a random letter for Mangalacharanam in a random sutra at Ashtadhyayi? So, Bhashyakara clarifies. Mangalikaha Acharya, Acharya himself is Pavitra. Mahataha Shastra Ughasya. This is a huge text, Shastra text that he has written. Tasya Shastrasya Mangalartham Vakaram Agamam Prayunte. So this Vakara is added as an extra particle Agama purposely in the Bhuvadi Sutra because Acharya wants to do a Mangalacharanam. And why is this Mangalacharanam needed? Because there is a Siddhanta in the Shastra Parampara which says Mangaladini, Mangalamadhyani, Mangalantani hi Shastrani prathante. For a Shastra to prosper, it should have 3 points of Mangalacharanam. There must be Mangalacharanam in the beginning. There must be Mangalacharan somewhere in the middle. It need not be at the midpoint, but somewhere in the middle. And there must be Mangalacharanam at the end. So the first Mangalacharanam is the word Vruddhi of Vruddhi Radhij. I have already mentioned that. Instead of saying Adhij Vruddhihi, Panini Maharshi explicitly says Vruddhi Radhij because Vruddhihi is the word used for Mangalacharanam. Growth and prosperity are synonymous. So the word that means growth is used in the beginning. Similarly, all the way towards the end, the last sutra of Ashtadhyayi is a. And Akara, which is the name of Vishnu, is also Mangalacharanam. So the very last letter or very last word of Ashtadhyayi, a, is basically another Mangalacharanam. So there is a Mangaladitvam. There is a Mangalacharanam in the beginning. There is a Mangalacharanam at the end. And there is a Mangalacharanam in the middle. Mangaladini, Mangalamadhyani, Mangalantani cha Shastrani prathante. This middle Mangalacharanam is this Vakara which is inserted in the Bhuvadaya Sutra. But again, that makes no sense. Why Vakara? Why not Kakara, Takara, Makara, Sakara? Why? So the answer given by commentaries, again, this is all extrapolation, our understanding, our tarka. So the answer given by commentators is that Vakara is doing 2 types of Mangalacharanam over here. The first type of Mangalacharanam is that because Vakara has been inserted, Bhu now remains as it is. You do not see a Sandhi made. If there was no Vakara, then Bhu would have been transformed into Bhua. Now, because Vakara is inserted, Bhu is retained as it is. And this Bhu itself is the first letter of a very powerful Savitru mantra, Bhu Bhuva Swaha, also called as Gayatri mantra, also called as Mahavyarutihi. So, the very first letter Bhu, by retaining it as it is for doing Mahavyaruti or specifically indicating a reference to Bhur Bhuva Swaha, which is a type of Mangalacharanam. So one purpose of adding Vakara over here is to retain Bhu as it is, that is the Mahavyaruti Smaranam. But then you might again ask, why Vakara only? Why not some other letter? You can add any other letter and still the Bhu will remain as it is. And the answer given is that those of you who have probably studied or do the puja of Devi Saptashati will probably resonate to what I'm saying or will understand this. But in the Manasa Puja of Devi, you do the Manasa Puja using 5 Bija mantras or 5 letters. You say, Lam Prithivyaatmakam Gandham Samarpayami. Ham Akashatmakam Pushpam Samarpayami. Yam Vaivyaatmakam Dhupam Samarpayami. Ram Agnyatmakam Deepam Samarpayami. And then you say Vam Amrutatmakam Naivedyam Samarpayami. So Vakara as a Bija mantra is an indicator of Amruta. And there cannot be more auspicious, anything cannot be more auspicious than the Amrutatva. Therefore, the addition of Vakara is for indicating second type of Mangalacharanam, which is Amrutatva. So Nagesha explains this गुरु उच्चारणम इत्युक्ते भू इति उच्चारणम महाव्याहृति स्मरण लक्षण मंगलार्थम. So that's one mangalacharanam being done. And vakarasya amrutatva bijatvat mangala suchakatvam. So that's second type of mangalacharanam done. So with basically two different ways of doing Mangalacharanam inserted in between, which also now satisfies the Shastra Parampara. Mangaladini, Mangalamadhyani, Mangalantani cha Shastrani prathante, prosper, or get spread, or get elongated life, and so on. So this is the reason why Vakaragama is used in the Bhuvadi Sutra. Now there are other pakshas. केचन वैयाकरणाः भूवादयः इत्यस्य विग्रहं भू plus vadayah. So they say there is no adi word at all. They say the division is bhu plus vadayah. Bhu vadayah iti kurvanti. What is vadayah? Vadi iti shabdasya prathama bahuvachanam vadayah. And vadi means vachakah. This is a legitimate word in the language. Vadi means vachakah. So भूवाचक शब्दाः इत्युक्ते भूसदृशाः इत्युक्ते भू इत्यस्य अर्थस्य इत्युक्ते क्रिया इति रूपस्य वाचकाः. तो ये शब्दाः क्रियारूपस्य वाचकाः ते सर्वेपि धातुसंज्ञकाः. एतम् अर्थं स्पष्टीकर्तुं भूवादयः धातवः इति तत्र विग्रहं कृत्वा अर्थविधानं क्रियते. So that's the second paksha. The third paksha, there are a few more Vaiyakarnas who will say Bhuvadayah is actually Bhu plus Va plus Adayah. So there are three words over here. Bhu is the Bhu dhatu, Bhu bhavati. Va is yet another dhatu. Vati is a dhatu of Adadi Gana. Va gati gandhana yoho Vati. I can show it to you on the dhatu patha. So on the dhatu patha, there is a dhatu Vagati gandhanayoho in the adadi gana here. Vagati gandhanayoho. So that's the dhatu of adadi gana. So two dhatus are being indicated and others. So va iti adadi ganasya vagati gandhane iti dhatoho nirdesha asti. Now why only va? Why not bhu edho? Take two in sequence if you want. So the explanation is that bhu is very special because it has two meanings. One is prithvi and other is the kriyavachakatva. Similarly, va as a word also has two meanings. The word va is used for option, vikalpa, and va is a dhatu samyaka. So when you are saying bhu, va, and others, what is a common property between bhu and va? It is kriyavachakatva. Therefore, in all the kriyavachakatva arthas, bhu and others are dhatus. So भू प्रभृतयः वा सदृशाः शब्दाः धातु सम्यकाः सन्ति. वा इति धातोः अपि द्वौ अर्थौ शब्दस्य, I should have written शब्दस्य, वा इति शब्दस्य द्वौ अर्थौ विकल्पः and क्रियावाचकत्वम्, and therefore भू and va, these two words, they have the sadharanya common property as the kriyavachakatva. There are a few typos in this statement, I'll fix it later on. But bhu tatha va iti dvayoho shabdayoho क्रियावाचकत्वम् इति अर्थस्य साधर्म्यत्वात् तस्मिन् अर्थे एव धातुसंज्ञा विधीयते इति अत्र भिन्नानि उत्तराणि अस्य प्रश्नस्य दत्तानि वर्तन्ते. Any questions? Okay, अग्रे गच्छामः. So that's all about the भूवादयो धातवः. So there is a question which says va vibhashartham nasti va bhu va anya dhatu va iti na bhavati tadrisham spashtikaranam kutrapi vyakhyane maya na labdham. So again, as I mentioned, this is all speculation. So I am just putting forth the pakshas that have been accepted in the tradition. Agrimam Sutram, so that the Bhuvadayo Dhatavaha Sutra was for the Aupadeshika Dhatus, the Dhatus that exist in the Dhatu Patha. The next Sutram is Sanadyanta Dhatavaha. So it is 3.1.32, somewhere completely different. So see this, Bhuvadayo Dhatavaha is 131 in the Prathamadhyaya, whereas Sanadyanta Dhatavaha is in the Trityadhyaya, it is in the Pratyayadhikara. So in the Pratyayadhikara, Panini Maharshi first lists all the Sanadi Pratyayas, it's worth showing. So in the Pratyayadhikara, you see 3.1.1. Panini Maharshi lists all the Pratyayas, Sanadi Pratyayas from 315 to 3131. And after all the sanadi pratyayas are listed, then he says, I have now told all the sanadi pratyayas. These sanadi pratyayas, when they are at the end of something, that entity can also be called dhatu. So sanadyantaha dhatavaha इत्युक्ते सनादयः कमेर्णिगन्ताः प्रत्ययाः sanadayah starting from guptichkidbhyah san 315. So this is the san pratyaya. You start from this san pratyaya, come all the way till the end. The last pratyaya that you will come across is kamerning over here. Kamerning. So starting from that particular 315 up to this particular 3130. So sanadyantaha sanadayah kamerningantaha, all the pratyayas that have been listed in this entire section, ante yesham te dhatu samnyaha syuh. So sanadyantaha dhatavaha, sanadyantaha dhatava both are prathama bahuvachanam. Sanadyantaha is the uddesham, dhatavaha is the vidheyam. San iti adihi yesham te sanadayah. So sanadyantaha is a sanadi antaha. What is sanadi? Sun and others. Guptichkidbhyah sun ityasmat arabhya kamerning iti yavat vidyamanaha sarvepi. There are 11 pratyayas directly written in Ashtadhyayi. One extra is added by the Vartikakara. So 12 total. So all these pratyayas are called sanadis. Don't get confused. There is adi and anta. Both words are sitting right in this word. So sanadi is a sun and others. That's sanadi. It is a set of 12 pratyayas. तेषु कश्चन प्रत्ययः अन्ते यस्य. सो सन आदिः येषां ते सनादयः, सनादयः अन्ते येषां ते सनाद्यन्ताः. गुप्तिचकिद्भ्यः इत्यस्मात् आरभ्य कमेर्णिङ् इति यावत् आहत्य 12 सनादि प्रत्ययाः. द लिस्ट इज गिवन ओवर हियर. एतेषु कश्चन प्रत्ययः यस्य अन्ते अस्ति सः शब्दः सनाद्यन्तः नाम्ना ज्ञायते. अस्य शब्दस्य धातु संज्ञा भवति. Examples: P pathisha, there is a san pratyaya. Pathi, there is a nich pratyaya. Putriya, there is a kyach pratyaya. Shenaya, there is a kyang pratyaya. Some sanadi pratyayas are attached to pratipadika, some attached to dhatus. All this has been already taught. Dhatu pradeshaha, dhatoho, ityevam adayaha. So two types of dhatus. The avyutpanna dhatus given by bhuvadayo dhatavaha. The vyutpanna dhatus, which are always the sanadi pratyayanta dhatus, given by sanadyanta dhatavaha. Agre gacchamaha. So just like the way dhatus move on to the pratipadiks, again this slide is copied from one of the previous classes. Dviprakarakani pratipadikani santi avyutpannani pratipadikani etesham agre ashtadhyayi sutranam adharena prakriti pratyay vibhagah न संभवति. And vyutpannani pratipadikani etesham ashtadhyayi sutranam adharena prakriti pratyay vibhagah संभवति. And then these are further classified as krudanta pratipadikam, tadhitanta pratipadikam, and stri pratyanta pratipadikam, samasta pratipadikam, and so on. So again, same slide as one of the previous classes. There are two sutras. There is one sutra for avyutpanna pratipadikas. There is other sutra for vyutpanna pratipadikas. This time the sutras are consecutive. So you have 1 to 45. The sutra is in 1.2. Prathamadhyasya dvitiyaha padaha. Arthavat adhatuh apratyayah pratipadikam. So that is the first sutra which gives avyutpanna pratipadiks. And immediately next sutra, kruttadhita samasasya, this gives vyutpanna pratipadiks. So let's take a look at the first sutram. Arthavat adhatur pratyayah pratipadikam padacheda arthavat adhatuh apratyayah. So negation is being done and whatever is left is called pratipadikam. Arthavat adhatuh apratyayah iti prakarakah shabdah. So a word which is arthavat, which has some meaning. Random collection of letters is not meaningful, so that's to be excluded. Arthavat, the word must have a meaning. Adhatuhu, dhatus are not to be considered because dhatus have meanings. Bhu, sattayam, edhavruddho, and so on. They have their meanings, but they are not to be considered. Apratyayah, it should not be pratyayanta word. So subantas, tigantas are automatically out. Even krudantas, tadhitantas, and so on are out. Anything that is not a pratyayanta word, anything that is not a dhatu, anything that has a meaning, and obviously anything which is not pratyaya itself. So apratyaya means two things, not a pratyaya and not pratyayanta. That is called pratipadikam. So arthavat ityukte arthaha yasya vidyate, यस्य शब्दस्य उच्चारणेन कश्चन अर्थः मनसि उद्भवति. अधातुः, धातु भिन्नः धातुः नास्ति अप्रत्ययः प्रत्ययः नास्ति सो क्त क्तवतु and so on are eliminated and प्रत्ययान्तः अपि नास्ति so पठित पठितवान् so पठितवत् पठित पठितवत् or say gatva and so on are also eliminated so pratyayantah nasti and obviously when we say pratyayantah nasti only the pratyas in the frame of Ashtadhyayi are to be considered because if you jump out of the framework and go to unadi pathas almost everything is vyutpanna so unadi patha is to be kept aside over here so Ashtadhyayam pathitah pratyah yasya ante nasti tadrishah shabdah so अर्थवान शब्दः धातु भिन्नः प्रत्यय भिन्नः प्रत्ययान्त भिन्नः प्रातिपदिक संज्ञः भवति उदाहरणं किं हा हा नेम ऑफ अ गंधर्व हु another name of a gandharva ditha kapitha these are also names in the language vayu lakshmi so these are unadi pratyanta words which are not derivable in the Paninian framework so these are all examples of this sutram प्रयोगः प्रातिपदिक प्रदेशाः ह्रस्वो नपुंसके प्रातिपदिकस्य so I hope you remember प्रातिपदिक प्रदेशः means what pick up any sutra which has the word प्रातिपदिक in it so ह्रस्वो नपुंसके प्रातिपदिकस्य इत्येवम् आदयः now in this context there is a line in Kashika which is worth understanding it's actually very simple but let's see that Kashikakara says over here anarthakasyapi I hope you're able to see this anarthakasya api nipatasya pratipadika samnya ishyate so the upasargas like pra, para, apa, sama and so on, there are two pakshas about them. Some people say that upasargas don't have meaning on them on their own. Only when these upasargas or these pradis to be technically correct, only when they are added to something else, a new meaning is generated. So for example, we might not have its own meaning, but we when connected with ji dhatu creates a meaning vijayate. We when connected with hara dhatu creates an altogether different meaning viharati so meanings are these upasargas are simply modifiers they do not have their own meaning whereas there are some other paksha or other school of thought which says upasargas or these pradis will have their own meaning anyway it is just that this meaning gets modified when it is added to a dhatu or say to another word and so on so in the first paksha the question comes pra and so on are not pratipadikas because now they are not arthavat but you need pra it and so on to be pratipadikas for multiple reasons remember that all the upasargas pra para apa and so on when they are used in a sentence are actually padas so in agachati there are actually two padas a is a separate pada agachati is a separate pada now, in order for a to become a pada, it must be pratipadika to start with, and then you can add a supratyay on it. Unless it is a pratipadika, you cannot add a supratyay and it will not become a pada. So, therefore, a must become a pratipadika. But in order for a to get the pratipadika samnya, it needs to have artha, which creates a problem for the paksha which doesn't believe that these a, upa, sama, and so on have separate arthas. Therefore, there is this particular line in Kashika अनर्थकस्य अपि निपातस्य अत्र प्रातिपदिक संज्ञा इष्यते so even though the sutra has the word arthavat it is again upalakshanartha only for the anarthaka nipatas like for example adhyagachati has adhi plus a two anarthaka nipatas are there or in pralambate there is a pra which is anarthaka nipata over there and why anarthaka because pra does not add or change the meaning of lambate therefore it doesn't even add any new meaning again in that sense there is an anarthakatva added over there so there are different parts of discussions over here we don't need to go in the detail the basic idea is a nipata which on the face of it might look like meaningless is also considered a pratipadika therefore anarthakasyapi nipatasya pratipadika samnya ishyate उपसर्गाणां स्वेषाम् अर्थाः न सन्ति अस्मिन् पक्षे इदं वचनं नो चेत् उपसर्गेण धातोः अर्थे परिवर्तनं न क्रियते इत्यस्मिन् पक्षे अपि इदं वचनम् so that's about arthavada dhatur pratyay pratipadikam the immediate next sutra is kruttadhita samasascha so now we have eliminated all pratyayanta words which means that words like pathita or say gatavat cannot be pratipadikas anymore But you cannot use standalone words like pathita and gatavat and so on in your sentence. You have to say pathitaha or pathita or say gatavan and so on. And therefore, you need a pratipadika samnya even for these krudantas. So gatavat is a krudanta. Similarly, dasharathi is a tadhitanta. And we want to create forms like dasharathihi, dasharathi and so on. So we need a pratipadika samnya on them. Therefore, this next sutra is created. Krut tadhita samasascha. Krut tadhita samasaha cha pratipadika samyakaha bhavanti. That comes as an anuvritti. So krut tadhita samasaha pratipadikam. Krut tadhita samasa is the samni. Pratipadikam is the samnya, the vidheyam. Krut tadhita samasa is a simple dvandva samasa. Krut cha tadhitaha cha samasaha cha. The pratyayas krut themselves indicate the pratyayanta words. So kruta ityanena krut pratyayanta shabdaha grihyante. So pachaka is a vul pratyayanta shabda. Gachat is a shatru pratyayanta shabda. So these are krut pratyayanta words. Tadhita iti shabdena tadhita pratyayanta shabdaha grihyante. So dasharathi is a iya pratyayanta shabda. Shaiva is a ana pratyayanta shabda. तो तद्धित प्रत्ययांत शब्दाः गृह्यन्ते एंड ऑब्वियसली समास इत्यनेन समास प्रक्रियया निर्मिताः शब्दाः गृह्यन्ते. सो सीतापति सीतायाः पतिति समास प्रक्रियया निर्मितः शब्दः एतेषां सर्वेषां प्रातिपदिक संज्ञा भवति. सो कृत् प्रत्ययान्त शब्दाः तद्धित प्रत्ययान्त शब्दाः तथा च समास प्रक्रियया निर्मिताः शब्दाः प्रातिपदिक संज्ञकाः भवन्ति. प्रातिपदिक प्रदेशाः ह्रस्वो नपुंसके प्रातिपदिकस्य इत्येवम् आदयः. Any questions? Again, there is something fishy in this sutra. You must get a question about it. Vidyaji.
नमस्कारः महोदय. तत्र प्रश्नः मम अपवादत्वं वर्तते वा अत्र?
कस्य अपवादत्वं?
नाम तत्र प्रत्ययः इति पूर्वस्मिन् सूत्रे अस्ति. अत्र कृत् तद्धितान्ताः अपि प्रत्ययान्ताः एव. परन्तु अपवादत्वं नाम तत्र विधिसूत्रेष्वेव भवति किल? एतदपि अपवादत्वेन स्वीक्रियते.
सर्वप्रथमं तु अपवादत्वं विधिसूत्रेषु भवति इति न. अपवादस्य अध्ययनसमये मया पाठितमासीत् संज्ञासूत्राणामपि अपवादाः सन्ति. तत्र ह्रस्वं लघु संयोगे गुरु इति उत्सर्गापवादत्वमेव. अतः संज्ञासूत्राणामपि अपवादत्वम् अस्ति. परन्तु अत्र प्रत्ययविधानं न क्रियते. सो प्रत्ययः सूत्र इज नथिंग टू डू ओवर हियर. वी आर डिफाइनिंग द प्रातिपदिक संज्ञा. वी आर सेइंग दैट एनीथिंग दैट इज अ कृत प्रत्ययांत वर्ड and anything that is a tadhita pratyayanta word is a pratipadika. That's all that we are saying over here.
पूर्वस्मिन् सूत्रे प्रत्ययान्ताः संज्ञां न प्राप्नुवन्ति.
करेक्ट करेक्ट. अप्रत्ययः प्रत्ययान्त शब्दस्य प्रातिपदिक संज्ञा न भवति
परन्तु
निषेधे प्राप्ते. करेक्ट. सो इति निषेधे प्राप्ते अत्र कृदन्तस्य तद्धितान्तस्य च प्रातिपदिक संज्ञार्थम् इदं सूत्रं पुनः नूतन रूपेण निर्मितम् इति आशयः.
आम् अस्तु. तत्र अपवादत्वं न वर्तते, निषेधत्वं वर्तते वा?
No, you can say it is apavadatvam, but it's not like siddhe sati. It's not like niravakashatvam apavadasya bijam. So that is not the case over here. You can just say something that is incomplete in the previous sutra. Purvasmin sutre yasmin vishaye vidhanam na krutam asi tasya vidhanartham atra nutanam sutram uchyate.
Astu.
This is all theoretical discussion. Whether it will be apavada or not doesn't really matter. Basically, one part was told in the previous sutra and it's being completed in the next sutra. That's it. Maybe there are commentaries which will say this is apavada. Is worth checking. Okay. Anything else? Somebody is asking, is this the Niyama Sutra? It is not a Niyama Sutra because Niyama Sutra is Siddhe Sati Arambha. If something was already told and is being reinstantiated for a certain context, then it is a Niyama. Here, the Pratipadika Samnya for Krudanta and Tadhitanta was not told at all. So, see, in the previous Sutram, there is no clear mention that प्रत्ययांत शब्दाः प्रातिपदिक संज्ञकाः न सन्ति इति नोच्यते. केवलं प्रत्ययांत भिन्न शब्दाः प्रातिपदिक संज्ञकाः सन्ति इति उच्यते. इत्युक्ते प्रत्ययांत शब्दानां विषये इदानीं किमपि विधानं न कृतम्. If you just say all boys go to library, it is not saying girls don't go to library. There is no vidhanam done for girls. The vidhanam is only done for boys. Maybe in the next statement, a separate vidhanam may be done for girls. So that's how this. Therefore, there is no direct utsargapavada relation over here. Srinivas Mahoday.
नमस्ते महोदय। अत्र कृत् तद्धितसमासः एव गृहीताः, स्त्रीप्रत्ययान्तशब्दाः अपि तत्र
Very good, very good. So that is one question. That is actually second question, but I'm going to talk about it in details. But before that, there is one question that, but let's see, now that you have asked this question, let's actually go over there. So before even that, let's have a very basic question. So asmin sutre krud grahanam kimartham and tadhita grahanam kimartham. So let's ask the very fundamental question. Krut grahanam kimartham, tadhita grahanam kimartham. Obviously, this is a no-brainer. Krut pratyayanta shabdaha, tadhita pratyayanta shabdaha, purva sutrena pratipadika samnikaha na bhavanti. Teshamapi pratipadika samnya ishyate, atah krut grahanam, tadhita grahanam cha atra krutam asti. So this much is good. And then the next question, somebody has also typed the question over here. Someone asked this. स्त्री प्रत्ययांत शब्दानां प्रातिपदिक संज्ञा कथम भवति. So कृत प्रत्यय is included, तद्धित प्रत्यय is included. Let's actually list all 7. So we have krut and tadhita, 2 are taken care of. Stup and ting, obviously they generate a pada, so they are not going to be taken care of. Vikarna pratyas are inserted in between the dhatu prakriya, so there is no question of the pratipadikatva of those pratyayas. And then the remaining are the san pratyayas, but sanadyanta dhatava, so they are taken care in the dhatus. So all 6 are done, only 3 pratyayas are not being discussed. And therefore, the fundamental questions, 3 pratyayanta shabdanam pratipadika samnya katham bhavati. And the interesting answer is, 3 pratyayanta shabdanam sakshat kenapi sutrena pratipadika samnya na bhavati. There is no sutram in Ashtadhyayi that will say mala is a pratipadika in a direct sense. However, there is a siddhanta in Vyakarana Shastra which says प्रातिपदिक ग्रहणे लिंग विशिष्टस्यापि ग्रहणम. यत्र प्रातिपदिकम् अनुसृत्य किंचन कार्यम उक्तम अस्ति तत्र तस्मात् प्रातिपदिकात् स्त्री प्रत्ययं कृत्वा सिद्धे शब्दे अपि तत् कार्यं भवितुम् अर्हति. It is like a typical puja. When the husband sits and does the puja, half of the punya automatically goes to the wife, even if the wife is not sitting for that puja. It is exactly like that over here. Pratipadika grahane linga vishishtasyapi grahanam. So anytime a certain karya is told for, say, deva as a pullinga word, similar karya will be applicable for the feminine form devi. So devi need not be a pratipadikam. Anytime the pratipadika samnya is being used in any sutra and that sutra is applicable for deva, the feminine form is tagged along. So प्रातिपदिक ग्रहणे लिंग विशिष्टस्यापि ग्रहणम् इति परिभाषा वर्तते. यत्र प्रातिपदिकम् अनुसृत्य किंचन कार्यमुक्तमस्ति तत्र तस्मात् प्रातिपदिकात् स्त्री प्रत्ययं कृत्वा सिद्धे शब्दे अपि तत् कार्यं भवितुम् अर्हति इति अस्याः परिभाषायाः अर्थः. So for example, sup pratyayah pratipadikebhyah vidhiyante. We all know that all pratipadikas get sup pratyaya. Ataha प्रातिपदिकेभ्यः स्त्री प्रत्यये कृते तस्मादपि सुप्रत्ययाः विधीयन्ते. So because deva gets su aujas, devi will also get su aujas. अनेन प्रकारेण स्त्री प्रत्ययान्त शब्दानां यद्यपि व्याकरण शास्त्रे साक्षात् प्रातिपदिक संज्ञा नास्ति तथापि तैः शब्दैः सह प्रातिपदिक सदृशः एव व्यवहारः भवति. अतः स्त्री प्रत्ययान्त शब्दानाम् अपि प्रातिपदिक रूपेण ग्रहणे न कश्चन दोषः. So if you say mala is akarant pratipadika, technically in the frame of Ashtadhyayi sutras you are not talking correct. But for all practical purposes this statement is not wrong. I always give this example. It is as if saying that sun is stationary versus sun is moving through the sky. The reality is that the sun is stationary and earth revolves around it. But for all practical purposes, we say sun rises, sun sets, sun moves from this nakshatra to that nakshatra and so on. So for all practical purposes, sun is moving. But from a pure astronomical point of reference, sun is stationary. This is exactly happening over here. Purely from the sutra point of view, Stri Pratyayanta words are not Pratipadikas, but for all practical purposes, Stri Pratyayanta words are Pratipadikas. And in the frame of Ashtadhyayi reference, not having a Pratipadika Samnya on the Stri Pratyayas does not matter because Pratipadika Grahane Linga Vishishtasyapi Grahanam Kriyate. Any questions? Let's move ahead. There is yet another sutra, there is yet another question that should come up in this particular context, in the context of this particular sutram. So one question is legitimate. Stri Pratyayana Vishay Kim Bhavati. I have explained that. I'll wait for another minute. If some other question comes up to your mind, I will be glad to answer that. Otherwise, the question is there on the slide over here anyway. Somebody is very rightly saying this in the chat. Why is the samas entity present in this sutram? Understand this. Krut is understandable because krut is pratyaya, which is not covered in the previous sutra. Tadhita is understandable because tadhita is not covered in the previous sutra. But what about samasa? Samasa prakriyayah siddhaha shabdaha arthavantaha. When you take Sitapati, it is arthavat. It is not dhatu. It is not pratyaya. There is no pratyaya in Sitapati anywhere. So then, tesham purva sutrenaiva pratipadika samnya siddhyati. Tarhi punah asmin sutre. Sorry. Tarhi punah asmin sutre. Something happened to my computer here over here. Okay. Tarhi punah asmin sutre tesham grahanam kimartham. So the answer given by commentaries is as follows. Samasa is a pada samuha. Pada samuha means two or more padas coming together. Samase dve athva adhikani padani vidyante. Sita is a separate pada, pati is a separate pada. So ityukte samasaha pada samuha asti. Asya pada samuhasya purva sutrenaiva pratipadika samnya siddhyati. अस्याम स्थितौ अस्मिन् सूत्रे पुनः समासग्रहणं कृतम् अस्ति. Siddhe sati arambha niyamartha. Anything that is already told and gets told again in a certain specific context, it's called niyama. So siddhe sati arambha niyamartha iti nyayena samasagrahanam niyamartham asti. So what kind of niyama is told? पद समूहस्य प्रातिपदिक संज्ञा भवति चेद समासस्य एव भवति, अन्य प्रकारकस्य पद समूहस्य प्रातिपदिक संज्ञा न भवति. So a pada samuha is a pratipadika. If you say a pada samuha is a pratipadika, it must be samasa only. It cannot be any other pada samuha. Pada samuhasya pratipadika samnya bhavati chet samasasya eva anyesham pada samuhanam na. And what is this anya pada samuha? It is vakyam. Vakya is also a pada samuha. Ramaha tatra asti is a pada samuha. It is not, it is arthavan. It is not a dhatu and it is not a pratyayanta. I mean, every word might have a pratyaya at the end, but Ramaha tatra asti as a sentence on its own is not pratyayanta. So vakyam api arthavad asti, vakyam api dhatu bhinnam asti, vakyam api pratyaya bhinnam asti, अतः तस्यापि पूर्वसूत्रेण प्रातिपदिक संज्ञा संभवति, तस्याः निषेधार्थम अत्र सूत्रे समासग्रहणं कृतम् अस्ति. So Siddhanta Kaumudi says पूर्व सूत्रेणैव सिद्धे समासग्रहणं नियमार्थम. यत्र संघाते पूर्वो भागः पदम. संघात इत्युक्ते पद समूह. In a pada samuha, basically when there is a first entity which is a separate pada, tasya ched bhavati tarhi samasasya eva. If a pratipadik samnya is to be added to a pada samuha, then it is only samasa. It is not other types of pada samuhas, namely the vakya. So sanghata means samuha. Yatra sanghate purvaha bhagaha padam tasya ched bhavati tarhi samasasya tena vakyasya na. See how detailed analysis is done in the Shastras. So that's all about the Krut Tadhita Samasascha Sutra. This completes the fundamental three components. Pratyaya, which is only one sutra, which is also an adhikara. Dhatu, which are basically two sutras. Bhuvadayo dhatavan sanabhyamta dhatavaha. And then Arthvadhatu Pratyaya Pratipadikam and Krut Tadhita Samasascha are the two for the Pratipadika. The next one is, give me 1 minute. the next one, the next sutram over here is suptingantam padam. Again, very simple sutra, padasamnya vidhayakam sutram. So suptingantam padam. Suptingantam is the uddesham, padam is the vidheyam. Suptingantam is samahara. Supchatincha anayoho samahara supting. And then antam. Supting ante yasyam. So द्वन्द्वान्ते विद्यमानं पदं प्रत्येकम् अभिसंबध्यते. So सुप् अन्ते यस्य नो चेत् तिङ् अन्ते यस्य. Very simple सूत्रम् actually. So सः शब्दः यस्य अन्ते सुप् प्रत्ययः यस्य अन्ते वा तिङ् प्रत्ययः अस्ति सः सुप् तिङन्तम् इत्यनेन निर्दिशते. एतादृशस्य शब्दस्य पदम् इति संज्ञा भवति. So राम प्लस सुरामः इति सुबन्तं पदम् अस प्लस तिप् अस्ति इति तिङन्तं पदम् and so on. So स्मर्तव्यं वाक्ये केवलं पदानामिव प्रयोगः भवति. There is a siddhanta which says apadam na prayunjita. Do not use a non-pada in a sentence. Therefore, a pada is the only entity that can be used in a sentence. The pada can either be constructed from a pratipadika by adding a sup pratyaya or from a dhatu by adding a ting pratyaya. Now, the pratipadika and dhatu are not referred over here. All that it says is subanta is a pada and tinganta is a pada. But sup pratyayas are only added to pratipadikas. That will be told in the pratipadika. That will be told in the pratyadhikara. Ting pratyayas are only to be added to dhatus. That will also be told in the pratyadhikara. So essentially, it turns out pratipadikam plus sup is the pada, dhatu plus ting is the pada, and only padas are to be used. Upasargaha tatha cha avyayani api padani santi. So Ramaha Lakshmanena sah agacchati ityatra Ramaha iti padam subantam. Lakshmanena iti padam subantam. सह इति पदम सुबंतम आ इति अपि पदम सुबंतम गच्छति इति पदम तिङन्तम. अनेन प्रकारेण अत्र पंचपदानि सन्ति. पदप्रदेशाः पदस्य इत्येवम् आदयः. There is a question I don't understand. What is pada after a sandhi? You can raise your hand so that I can let you ask the question. If you're asking like a pada remains a pada, yeah, tell me.
Tadeva Mohdaya, like pada, two pada, like it is not like a samasa, but still two pada, they are get added in a sandhi where varna vyatya happens. The end is also a pada only.
It is not a pada. It is not a pada. I always, there is one example that I think I give. If you mix wheat and rice, it is not a new grain. It is just wheat and rice together. So that's it. So iti plus api is not a separate pada. Ramaha plus gacchati, Ramo gacchati is not a separate pada. Ramo is a separate pada, gacchati is a separate pada. It is just wheat plus rice. Remember this, always remember this example. Wheat plus rice is not a separate grain. It is wheat plus rice. Exactly like that. You have anything else to say?
Like pada, like sandhi yukta padam, you can always like write separately. That is why like
See,
that.
first of all, don't use the word sandhi yuktam padam. So ityapi is not a pada. Ityapi is the kruta sandhi shabda. It is shabda dvayam ityeva vaktavyam. Iti is a separate pada, api is a separate pada. Just for normal conversation, you can say ityapi iti shabdaha, but always remember it is not a grammatical construct called pada. It is iti plus api. Whether you can write it separately or not is a separate story. So in the padya, for example, there is a rule that you must do this. The samhita is compulsory in the padya. So you have to do the sandhis wherever it is possible. So if a word comes in a phrase, then in a shloka, for example, so samaveta yutsavaha, it is actually samavetaha plus yutsavaha, but you say samaveta yutsavaha, you don't have an option over there, but still it is not a single pada, it is two separate padas. That's it. Okay, let's move on. This is the slide which has something new. So everything else till now was actually known to you except for the Shastra Vishayas. We are nearing towards the end of the class. This is the slide that will take a little while. So there is a very, very important concept in the Prakriya which is called Angam. Very important. This is the concept around which all the Prakriya revolves. So remember, in the Prakriya, the Pratyaya comes in the first or the second step. And as soon as the Pratyaya comes, almost everything that happens is based on an Anga. So it is very important to understand what an Anga is. Pratyayasya sandarbhena Angam iti eka vishishta samnya asti. So anga is always associated with a pratyaya. So when I say X is an anga, this is an incomplete sentence. I must say X is an anga of pratyaya Y. So a anga is always associated with a pratyaya. प्रत्ययस्य सन्दर्भेण अंगम इति एका विशिष्टा संज्ञा अस्ति प्रक्रियायाः भिन्नेषु सोपानेषु प्रायेण in most of the cases, obviously there are exceptions, but in most of the cases आदेश आगमादिकं कार्यम अंगस्य संदर्भेण भवति. So there will be sutras which will say angasya adesham kuru, angasya agamaha bhavet, angasya lopaha, angasya dvitvam, and so on. So angasya dvitvam is not there, but adesha agama lop for sure. So adesha agamadikam karyam angasya sandarbhena eva bhavati. किम नाम अंगम इति चेद यस्मात् शब्दात् प्रत्ययः विहितः अस्ति तस्मात् शब्दात् आरभ्य प्रत्यय पर्यन्तं विद्यमानः सर्वः अंशः तस्य प्रत्ययस्य अंगम नाम्ना ज्ञायते. So at the very important, understand this, at a very initial step of the prakriya, there is a dhatu, for example, say kru, and a tipa pratyaya is added to this dhatu. So you have a combination called kru plus tipa. Now, as the prakriya proceeds, there might be some changes that might happen in between. So there might be some adeshas, some agamas that will be inserted in between. So the final configuration at say some middle step in the prakriya might not be kru plus tipa. It might be kru plus something plus tipa. It might not even be kru. Kru might have been changed to say kri or chru or kar, anything like that. But it will have a kru component inside it. Then there will be something, and finally there will be the pratyaya over there. In this particular configuration, what is anga? So anga means yasmat shabda pratyaya vihitah asti. So the pratyaya was added to kru. So in that particular line, search where that kru is. It might be in a disguised form like kri or kar and so on, but that is your kru. So tasmat shabdat arabhya, start taking entire thing from that entity up to the pratyaya. Whatever is in the middle, you have to take it. So tasmat shabdat arabhya pratyaya paryantam vidyamanaha sarvaha amshaha tasya pratyasya angam namna jnayate. So here is a prakriya to understand. The kru is a dhatu. I add a lata pratyaya. Lata gets converted to tipa. So this tipa is a pratyaya which is now added to the dhatu kru. Understand, at this particular step, kru plus tipa, ku is anga because there is nothing in between. But this is not what we are interested in. The prakriya proceeds, kru plus u plus ti. So a u particle comes in, then kru becomes kara, kara plus u plus ti. And at this particular step, at kara plus u plus ti, there is a sutram which says, find out the anga of the tip pratyaya and do a gunadesha. Tip iti pratyasya angasya gunadeshah bhavati. So what is the configuration? The configuration is kara plus u plus ti. Now the question is, who is the anga of tip pratyaya? So remember, yasmat shabdat pratyaya vihitah asti. The pratyaya was added to kru, which is now being represented in the form of kara. So take that kara. Tasmat shabdat arabhya pratyaya paryantam vidyamanah sarvahamshaha. So basically kara plus u. The pratyaya is not to be taken. It is to be excluded. So yasmat tip pratyaya vihitah asti. इत्युक्ते क्रू इति धातुः तस्मात् आरभ्य टिप् प्रत्यय पर्यन्तं विद्यमानः अंशः इत्युक्ते कर प्लस उ इति अंशः. This entire amsha kara plus u is called the anga of the tip pratyaya. So kara plus u is the anga of tip pratyaya. Asya angasya gunadeshah bhavati. So kara plus u will become o as a part of gunadesha. We are going to learn that. But O is the guna samyaka word, a guna samyaka letter, adaying gunaha. So O is the guna samyaka word, so U gets converted to O. So gunadesha bhavati is not the point for you to understand right now. Just take it granted right now. The only thing to understand is who is the anga. So the anga kara plus U iti angam asti. Tasya gunadeshe krute kara plus O iti bhavati. Asya angasya gunadeshah bhavati. Atah karu iti asit. Tasya gunadeshe krute करो इति रूपम सिद्ध्यति. This is the reason why you cannot create a simple definition like yasmat pratyayaha tadangam. A prakruti to which a pratyaya is added is not the anga. The anga is defined as yasmat pratyaya vidhihi, from the entity to which the pratyaya is added, tadadihi. Start from that. Pratyaye. This is a saptami. Pratyaye pare. So start from that entity and take everything till you reach the pratyaya. So the sutra is now self-explanatory. Yasmat pratyaya vidhihi tadadi pratyaye angam. So yes, was there a typo? Somebody is asking. Okay, let me address the question later on. Yasmat pratyaya vidhihi tadadi pratyaye angam. So yaha pratyayaha यस्मात् क्रियते इत्युक्ते क्रू इति धातोः प्रत्ययः कृतः अस्ति तदादि शब्द स्वरूपम स्टार्टिंग फ्रॉम दैट रीचिंग टिल द प्रत्यय तस्मिन् प्रत्यये परे सो इट इज द पर सप्तमी सो यू डोंट इंक्लूड दैट तस्मिन् प्रत्यये परे यत् सर्वं विद्यते तद् अंगसम्यम् अस्ति सो यस्मात् प्रत्यय विधिः तदादि प्रत्यये अंगम now it is easy to understand yasmat pratyay vidhi ityukte yasmat shabdat pratyah vidhiyate तदादिः इत्युक्ते सः आदिः यस्य यस्मात् शब्दात् प्रत्ययः विधीयते सः आदिः यस्य सो तस्मात् आरभ्य प्रत्यये परे सो एवरीथिंग कलेक्टेड टुगेदर सेज यस्मात् शब्दात् प्रत्ययः विधीयते तस्मात् आरभ्य तं प्रत्ययं यावद् विद्यमानः सर्वः अंशः प्रत्ययस्य अंगम् इति संज्ञया निर्दिश्यते सो अत्र भू अनदर एग्जांपल आई एम गिविंग ओवर हियर भू इति धातोः तिप् इति प्रत्ययः भवति अग्रे प्रक्रियायां तिप् प्रत्ययस्य उपस्थितौ भू धातोः शप् इति गणविकर्ण प्रत्ययः विधीयते सो देयर इज अ विकर्ण प्रत्यय another pratyay that is inserted so now you have the configuration of भू plus shapa plus tipa now there are two pratyayas each pratyaya will have its own anga so तिप् प्रत्ययस्य अंगम किम इति चेत् भू प्लस शप इति तिप् प्रत्ययस्य अंगम शप प्रत्ययस्य अंगम किम इति चेत् शप वाज एडेड टू भू सो प्रत्ययात् आरभ्य सॉरी द यस्मात् प्रत्यय विधीयते तस्मात् आरभ्य प्रत्यय पर्यंतम सो ओनली भू सो शप प्रत्ययस्य अंगम भू इति अस्ति अनेन प्रकारेण the anga samnya is defined by taking from the entity to which the pratyay is added. Understand, you are not going to start taking off from all the way from the left. There might be other things to the left of bhu or to kru, for example. For example, in the lang lakara form, bhavat, is added separately later on. The tip pratyaya is not added to akara, it is added to bhu. So the configuration is there is then bhu, then shap and then ta. So then that particular ta pratyaya, the lang lakara pratyaya, anga for that will start from bhu. It will not start from a. So it is not always starting from the leftmost entity. It is not always the prakruti alone, but it is starting from the prakruti, going all the way, taking everything in between, going all the way till the pratyaya. That is why such a convoluted definition is created. Yaha pratyayaha yasmat kriyate tadadihi shabda swarupam tasmin pratyaye pare angasamnyam bhavati iti sutrarthaha. And the sutra is also now self-explanatory. Yasmat pratyay vidhihi tadadi pratyaye angam. And this anga samnya is extremely important because there is a very valuable adhikara in Ashtadhyayi called angasya. This is an adhikara that spans 5 padas: 6.4, 7.1, 7.2, 7.3 and 7.4. So starting from 6.4 up to सप्तमाध्यायस्य परिसमाप्ति पर्यन्तम अस्मात् सूत्रात् आरभ्य सप्तमाध्यायस्य अन्तपर्यन्तं सर्वेषु सूत्रेषु अंगस्य इति अध्याहारः कर्तव्यः इत्युक्ते in this adhikara what all sutras have been told, what all transformations have been told are all to be done on an anga. प्रक्रियायाम् अस्य अंगस्य यानि भिन्नानि परिवर्तनानि संभवन्ति तेषां सर्वेषां संकलनम् अस्मिन् अधिकारे कृतम् अस्ति. So अङ्गप्रदेशाः अङ्गस्येत्येवमादयः अङ्गस्येति एकः अधिकारः अस्ति. अस्य व्याप्तिः सप्तमाध्यायस्य परिसमाप्तिं यावत् वर्तते. अस्मिन् अधिकारे विद्यमानैः सूत्रैः अङ्गविशिष्टं कार्यम् उक्तम् अस्ति. Now there is a question. There are two questions over here. One question is kara plus u anga or is karu anga? So the question says kara plus u iti angam uta karu iti angam iti navagamyate. So there is no difference between kara plus u and karu. It is purely varnamelanam. And when you write kara plus u, all that you are saying is I am specifically representing kara and u separately because I have an intention of doing something else on kara and something else on u, or I want to show them as separate particles. Whereas when you write karu, you are just saying I am removing that plus sign and putting them together. So writing with plus sign or with varnamelanam is exactly the same in the prakriya. There is absolutely no difference. You can simply write kru uti, or here instead of kara plus uti, you can just say karuti. It will not matter. The general convention is to keep them separate as it is. That's why I wrote kara plus uti amshaha, but karu and kara plus u are all one and the same in the context of a prakriya. Then there is another question which says, does it include all the adeshas and agamas? Yes, it includes everything which is sitting in between, which is not a pratyaya. So if pratyaya gets an agama, then that is a pratyaya part. So then that will not be included. So for example, let's take a hypothetical case where there is a prakriti called X and there is a pratyaya called Y. And then some another pratyaya comes and sits which is called Z. And then X gets an agama called P. And then Z also gets an agama say called Q. And then Y gets an agama called R. Now in this context, who is the anga? So you start, maybe X also gets another agama T before that. We really don't care. As long as it is agama, it is a part of that entity. So then we start with this TXP, include ZQ, and that's it. You don't go to R because R is a part of the pratyaya. So anything which is a pratyaya is not to be included. Which pratyaya? The last pratyaya. Middle pratyayas can be included. But the last pratyaya whose anga is being discussed, that pratyaya cannot be included. You start with the prakriti, take all agamas on that particular prakriti, and then actually agamas only specific to the pratyaya. If an agama like adagama and so on is added separately, that is not to be included because it is not part of the dhatu. So anything that becomes the part of the dhatu over here in the context of the pratyaya, that is to be added, that is to be included till the pratyaya. Now there is a question which says, is there an order on how to resolve bhu plus shapa plus ti? First resolve shapa. So yes, there is an order, but we will not go in those details because they are completely irrelevant for today's discussion. Agre gachhamaha. So we talked about the anga samnya. The next samnya that we want to talk about is lopa. So dhatu is done, pratipatika is done, pada is done, anga is done. Two samnyas are remaining, lopa and vibhakti. We should be done in 10 minutes or so. So lopaha. Again, very simple samnya. I think we have discussed this sutram. Prasaktasya adarshanam lopaha. So adarshanam lopaha is the sutram. Prasaktasya adarshanam lopa samyam syat. In this particular sutra, 1160, adarshanam lopaha, the sutra looks very simple. Adarshanam lopa, something that is not visible is lopa, but there is an anuvrutti that is done. It's actually a manduka pluti. So all the way 10 sutras before, there is this sthanentaratamaha sutram. The sthane component of sthanentaratama sutram comes as an anuvrutti all the way down in the Adarshanam lopaha sutra. So sthane iti mandukaplutya anuvartate. And what is the meaning of the word sthane? I'm going to talk about that when we talk about the Sthanentarama Sutra separately. But for now, the meaning of sthane is Ucharanasya prasangaha yada asti tada. So the Anuvritti Sahitam Sutra means Sthane Adarshanam Lopaha. Yada Ucharanasya prasangaha asti tada Ucharanam na kriyate tada saha amsha na drishyate chet tasya lopaha iti samnya bhavati. So this is very important. Anything random entity is not lopa. I mean, for example, in my class, I can take a random name and say that person is absent. This makes no sense. Is the person registered for your course? Is he attending the classes regularly? Only then whether the person is absent or present makes sense. In exactly the same way, is an entity expected to be there? Are you seeing that in the previous step of the prakriya and then suddenly it disappeared in the next step? So that is lopa. Therefore, sthane उच्चारणस्य प्रसंगे सति अदर्शनं भवति, दर्शनस्य अभावः भवति. Adarshanam means adarshanam, ashravanam, anucharanam, anupalabdhi, all are synonyms as Kashika explains it. Kidrusham idam adarshanam, it's not a random adarshanam. Prasange sati adarshanam. So yatra darshanasya prasangaha asti tatra adarshanam. Prakriyayaha purva sopane yad upalabdham asit तस्य अग्रिम सोपाने जायमाना अनुपलब्धिः अदर्शनम लोप संज्ञया निर्दिश्यते. And therefore the व्याख्याना से prasaktasya adarshanam, not random adarshanam, otherwise there will be all chaos. So prasaktasya adarshanam, praptasya adarshanam lopaha, this is the lopa samya, lopa pradeshaha, tasya lopaha ityevam adayaha. Now here is a little bit of complex stuff, that not complex but things that I have not yet taught you. This is new, so understand this. अष्टाध्याय्याम् अदर्शनस्य निर्देशार्थं चतस्रः संज्ञाः प्रयुक्ताः सन्ति. There are 4 words that are used in Ashtadhyayi to indicate adarshana, and this is not like va vibhasha anyatarasyam. So we talked about it. There are 3 words to indicate vibhasha, va vibhasha anyatarasyam, and they are all synonyms, and Panini uses whatever he wants, and then paryaya shabdanam vishe gaurav laghava charcha nadriyate. That's all separate. These 4 words are very, very specific. They are 4 samnyas of Ashtadhyayi. So Ashtadhyayam adarsanasya nirdeshartham chatasraha samnyaha prayujyante. One is obviously lopa, adarsanasya nirdeshartham. So adarshanam ityukte, something that is not visible. For that we have 4 samnyas. One I already taught, lopa. Example is atolopaha. Then there is a samnya called lukka, not English look, lukka. लुक इति शब्देन अदर्शनस्य निर्देशः क्रियते. एग्जांपल इज लुक स्त्रियाम. श्लू इति शब्देन अदर्शनस्य निर्देशः क्रियते. Yet another word that is used to indicate adarsanam is shlu. sh plus lu plus u. श्लू. श्लू इति शब्देन अदर्शनस्य निर्देशः क्रियते. जुहोत्यादिभ्यः श्लुः इति उदाहरणम्. And the third one is luppa. The previous one was lukka. Now here it is luppa. लुप इति शब्देन अदर्शनस्य निर्देशः क्रियते. जनपदे लुप. So this way there are 4 different words, lopaha, luk, shlu and lup, are used to indicate the concept of adarshanam in Paniniya Vyakaranam. And now understand this. Adarshanam can be of anything. It can be of an adesha, of an agama, of the prakriti itself, of pratyaya, whatever. So it's just a disappearance, it's just a lopa. So it can be of anybody. Now in that particular context, the lopa word is seen used for any general adarshana. So if it is adeshasya adarshanam, Panini will use lopa. If it is pratyayasya adarshanam, lopa. If it is agamasya adarshanam, lopa. So lopaha iti shabdaha प्रत्ययस्य अदर्शनस्य निर्देशार्थमपि प्रयुक्तः अस्ति. अप्रत्ययस्य इत्युक्ते आदेश आगम इत्यादिकस्य निर्देशार्थमपि इत्यादिकस्य अदर्शनस्य निर्देशार्थमपि प्रयुक्तः अस्ति. But the remaining 3 words, luk, shlu and lup, these are used only for pratyayasya lopa, pratyayasya adarshanam. So pratyayasya adarshanasya nirdeshartham, I missed out a word on the slide over here. Pratyayasya adarshanasya nirdeshartham, there are 4 samnyas, lopa, luk, shlu and lup. Let me repeat this. For other adarshanas like adesha adarshana, agama adarshana, prakriti adarshana and so on, there is only one term, lopa. For pratyaya, the lopa term can be used plus 3 additional terms are given, luka, shlu and lupa. And why are these terms given? So Panini Maharshi wants to give explicit karyas on the prakriya which has a lupa, which has a luk, which has a shlu and so on. So Panini Maharshi says, if a prakriya or if a pratyaya has undergone a luk type of lopa, then do certain karya. If a pratyaya has undergone shlu type of lopa, then do a certain karya. If a prakriya has the pratyaya which has undergone lupa type of lopa, do a separate karya. So pratyekam samnyaya krutasya adarshanasya bhinnam prayojanam asti. Example is lupi yuktavad vyakti vachane. This is a sutram. You don't need to know the meaning. This is a sutram which is only applicable for a lopa which is done with the lupa term. Shlau. This is a sutram which is used only for a lopa which is done with the shlu term. So in this way, Panini Maharshi defines three separate samnyas. The sutram is very simple. Pratyayasya luk shlu lupaha. Pratyayasya. So this is Adarshanam lopaha was 1160. Immediate next sutram, Pratyayasya luk shlu lupaha. Adarshanam comes as an anuvritti. So Pratyayasya Adarshanam. So pratyayasya lukshlu lupaha. Adarshanam is the anuvritti. Pratyayasya adarshanam lukshlu lupaha. So pratyayasya adarshanam is the samni. Lukshlu lupaha is the samnya. The lukshlu lupa is simply the dvandva samasa. Pratyayasya adarshanam triprakarakam. Luk, shlu and lupa. But this is not a samnya sankara. Samnya sankara means overlap. Random lopas are not being called lupa, shlu and lupa. So that's sankara. Sankara is crossing, crossbreeding or overlap and so on. So it is not like three samnyas given for any random type of pratyaya lopa. Atra samnya sankaraha nasti. Tat shabdena krutaha lopaha tat samnya nirdishate. So Panini says atra luk karotu. Atra shlu karotu, atra lupam karotu. So lukam karotu, lupam karotu, and so on. So atra luk bhavet, lup bhavet. So he uses these particular terms to indicate that corresponding lopa. So luk shabdena krutaha pratyay lopaha lup namna nirdishyate. Sorry, luk shabdena krutaha pratyay lopa luk samnya nirdishyate. And here is an example, luk striyam. So for this particular sutram 41109, the pratyaya undergoes an adarshana called luka. Eventually, it's all same. The pratyaya is going to be removed. The visible effect is not different, whether adarshana or whether lopa or luka or shlu and so on. But the term used is different because Panini wants to refer to that later on. So luka iti shabdena kriya krutaha pratyaya lopaha luka samnyaya. Shlu shabdena krutaha pratyaya lopaha shlu samnyaya. Lupa shabdena krutaha pratyaya lopa lupa samnyaya. So for example, juhotyadibhya shluhu. For this particular sutram, the lopa as is done by the shlu term. Janapade lupa. For this particular sutram, the lopa is done using the lupa term. So pratyasa adarshanam tribhihi prakarehi bhavitum arhati. And obviously, the fourth is also there. Pratyasya adarshanam lopaha iti shabdena api bhavitum arhati. So ato lopaha is a sutram where a pratyaya has undergone a lopa with the term lopaha. This is separate from luka, shlu and lupa. So etadrishaha lopaha luka, shlu, lup samnikaha nasti. So essentially 4 different ways of removing a pratyaya. Lopa, luka, shlu and lupa, and each has their own purposes which we will learn later on in the course. Anything else? If not, one small sutram, actually very simple, and then we will stop. So the sutram is very simple. Vibhaktischa. All that it says is suptingau vibhakti samnyau staha 14104. This is sutram towards the end of Prathamadhyaya 14104. Vibhaktischa supratyayaha tipratyayaha cha vibhakti samnyakaha bhavanti. So the very well-known term called vibhakti is being defined over here. Vibhakti cha. That cha is to bring anuvrittis of sup and ting and so on. So ting comes as an anuvritti, sup comes as an anuvritti, supaha tingaha vibhaktihi. So sup and ting pratyayanta, sorry, pratyayas, not the pratyayanta words. The pratyayanta words are called padas. Sup pratyayas and ting pratyayas themselves are called vibhakti, are called vibhaktis. So sup pratyayaha, ting pratyayaha, vibhakti samnyakaha santi, vibhakti pradeshaha, na vibhaktau tusmaha ityevam adayaha. So we say supratyas, we say these are vibhaktis, prathama vibhakti, dvitiya vibhakti and so on. For ting pratyas, we don't actually, in the language, we don't use the word vibhakti. We don't say Prathama Purusha are the Vibhakti Pratyayas. Madhyama Purusha are the Vibhakti Pratyayas. We use the term Purusha. That's also okay. But in the Vyakarana Shastra, all these Pratyayas, so Su, Aujas, Auchas, all Pratyayas are Vibhakti Pratyayas. And Tiptas, Ji, Siptastha are also Vibhakti Pratyayas. And the reason of giving the samnya is very trivial. Panini wants to give karyas based on this vibhakti. So, for example, na vibhaktau tusmaha, the sutra that we are going to learn in the immediate next class. So, there the vibhakti samnya will be used. So, there will be karyas that are applicable for general vibhaktis, and therefore Panini Maharshi gives supratyayas, not the supratyayanta shabdas. They are padas. Supratyayas are called vibhaktis. Ting pratyayas are called vibhaktis. And what Kashikakara does is that he also brings the words called Trini Trini. So there are words called Trini Trini a few sutras earlier. He brings those words in this particular sutram, and then he says the groups of three pratyayas are called vibhaktis by special names. Prathama vibhakti, Dvitiya vibhakti, Tritiya vibhakti, and so on. So these Prathama, Dvitiya, Tritiya are not the samnyas given by Panini Maharshi. The Vibhaktisha Sutra just says all 21 pratyayas are Vibhaktis. Similarly, all the 18 pratyayas on the Ting side are Vibhaktis. That's all the Sutra says. But Kashikakara brings the word Trini Trini so that he can say Supaha Trini Trini Vibhakti Samnyakaha Bhavanti, Ityukte Prathama Vibhakti, Dvitiya Vibhakti, and so on. So I have clarified this over here. Prathamadini namani Paninina Sutra Pathe Samnyarupena Uktani na santi. परंतु पाणिनिः भिन्नेषु सूत्रेषु एतेषाम् उपयोगम् अवश्यं करोति. So prathama, dvitiya, tritiya are the samnyas that are granted. Like sankhya, for example, 1, 2, 3. तेषां संख्या इति संज्ञा भवति इति लोकात् ज्ञायते. तथैव अत्रापि प्रथमा, द्वितीया are the names of the vibhaktis. That is only seen from the loka. There is no sutram in Ashtadhyayi for that. But Kashikakara somehow tries to justify that by bringing Trini as anuvritti. Not a big thing, but just, and again, this is not a reference seen in Siddhanta Kaumudi. This Kashikakara tries to add some extra flavor to this sutram. So that's all. There is one slide which actually I wanted to give as a self-study. So because I want to understand how much you read and how much you actually get through it. So I'm just going to put the question to you. The answer is there on the slide. Try to read it, and if there is a question, I will explain it in the next class. But I actually purposely created this particular slide so that you should go read and try to understand. So I'm just going to put the question in for the answer. The question and answer both are there on the slide, but I'm just going to put forth the question over here. Understand that sup and ting are the vibhakti pratyayas. The pada samnya is given by the sup pratyayanta words and ting pratyayanta words. They are the padas. So the sutram is suptingantam padam. The question is, sup and ting are vibhaktis. So why create a sutram called suptingantam padam? Why not say vibhaktyantam padam? So sup pratyay is also vibhakti, ting pratyay is also vibhakti. So vibhaktyantam padam iti kimartham nochyate. Suptingantam padam iti kimartham uchyate. Very small. And if you remember, the te vibhaktyantah padam is also a sutram in the Nyaya Sutras. There was a question in the I think MCQ for that. So vibhaktyantam padam iti vyakarana shastre kimartham nochyate. So that's the question, and there is an answer for this question which I want you to study on your own. So samapayama, this is the reason I'm giving you this as a homework or as a self-studies, because this is not directly related to any of the sutras. It is not a shastra vishaya as such. It is just a way for you to look a little bit more details into the sutra patha. So that's all. Samapayamaha. Here is just a minute. Here is a homework. Swavakyaihi uttarata. So 5 questions. You have to answer them in your own words. The first one is obviously suptingantam padamityasya sthane vibhakyantam padamiti kimartham noktam. And then the second question is interesting this time. Vyakhyanatah svikrutani vakyani swashabdaihi sasandarbham spashtikuruta. So there are 5 sentences picked up from the Vyakhyanas. I am trying to bring you towards actual goal of our course. I don't want you to depend on me throughout your Vyakarana Shastra study. You should be able to start studying on your own, getting you on your own legs to start studying Vyakarana. So here व्याख्यानतः स्वीकृतानि वाक्यानि स्वशब्दैः स्पष्टीकुरुत. Simple sentences are given. तेन संज्ञानां संकरो न भवति. I actually taught this. यदि तावत् संहितया निर्देशः क्रियते भ्वादय इति भवितव्यम्. I have taught this. Not everything has been taught. So for example, arthasya iyam samnya na shabdasya. I purposely omitted that. I wanted you to go to the commentaries and see. If not, I will discuss in the next class. So that's all for today's class. Srinivasa Mahoday, you have a comment question.
प्रश्नः अस्ति महोदय।
हाँ, हाँ.
तत्र अङ्गम् इत्यस्य विषये यत्
हाँ.
भवता उक्तं तत्र
हाँ.
प्रश्नः अस्ति, भवतः उदाहरणम् आसीत् किल TXP प्लस् इति।
हाँ, 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 हाँ.
तत्र भवान् उक्तवान्, अपि च भवतः उदाहरणम् आसीत् लङ् लकारविषये, यदा तत्र अकारस्य आगमः भवति, तर्हि तत्र किमर्थम् अ इति अङ्गे न स्वीक्रियते?
उत्तमः प्रश्नः। तत्र किमस्ति, अट् इति आगमः या भवति सः प्रत्ययस्य कारणात् न भवति। प्रत्ययस्य कारणात् यत्किमपि आगम इत्यादिकं भवति तद् धातोः अंशरूपेण तत्र अङ्गसंज्ञायां स्वीक्रियते। परन्तु अन्येन केनचित् कारणेन यदि आगमः भवति तर्हि सः अङ्गसंज्ञायां न स्वीक्रियते।
तर्हि अट् इति आगमः अनन्तरं भवति।
अनन्तरं भवति लुङ् लङ्। सो अत्र सूत्रमस्ति लुङ् लङ् लुङ् ष्वड् लुङ् लङ् लुङ् षुड् उदात्तः। सो लुङ् लकारे लङ् लकारे लुङ् लकारे च परे अङ्गस्य उदात्तः अट् आगमः भवति। अत्र अङ्गस्य आगमः भवति। सो तत्र अङ्गसंज्ञा प्रथमं का अस्ति इति ज्ञात्वा तस्य आगमः करणीयः। प्रत्ययस्य सन्दर्भेण अत्र आगमः नोक्तः, अङ्गस्य आगमः भवति।
अस्तु, अत्रापि अङ्गम् अस्ति परन्तु भिन्नं।
कस्य अङ्गम्? इदानीम् अत्र पश्यन्तु, अ प्लस् पठ प्लस् तिप इत्यत्र, now this prakriya is actually wrong. Adagama should come all the way at the end. You can look at this prakriya. Patha plus sicha plus la ityatra patha plus sa plus la iti pratyasya angam patha plus sa iti asti tasya adagamah jata iti atra ashaya.
ओ अस्तु अस्तु अस्तु, अवगतं, धन्यवादः।
सो अंगस्य आगमः क्रियते, धातोः आगमः क्रियते चेत् तद् धातोः अंशरूपेण भवति, परन्तु अत्र अङ्गस्य आगमः अस्ति, अतः that is different. Any further questions? If not, samapayamaha. Next week is going to be very interesting. I am going to teach Itsamnya Prakaranam, all the sutras of Itsamnya starting from Upadesha Jananasikaita up to Tasya Lopaha Sarvesham Adhyanam Agrima Varge Bhavishyati. And that will be the last class of the Samnya part. So this module consists of 10 classes. 5 are Samnya, 5 are Paribhasha. So Samnya part will be done by 25th. From 26th onwards, we have classes on Paribhasha. Ratnakar Mahoday.
Namaste Acharya. Though it is not actually a doubt, it is something, a mystery for me. A single person integrating, looking at the entire language and putting it in just 4,000 sutras. Almost this is an enigma for me. That's one. Probably you might also have felt that.
No, this is miracle. So that's why Panini Maharshi is called the very first and probably the most logical grammarian that exists till today. So this is not nothing less than a miracle, to be honest. Yeah.
Correct. That's right. Yeah. Something fantastic when I look at it.
And such a deep aspect. So small things. Even for one sutra, people do PhDs. So there is so deep meaning involved in single sutras over here. So a lot of interesting things. We will learn all these as the course proceeds. And
another thing is, he has looked at even certain single words also. For them also, he has given some sutra. That is the interesting part of it.
Correct. Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Anything else? Any further comments? अस्तु समापयामः। अग्रिमसप्ताहे नियमितरूपेण कक्षाद्वयं भविष्यति. I'll get you started on the means what? Just give you the again and revision on how to do the Parayanam memorization and all that in the last class of this particular module, so that you have the entire 2 months of vacation to practice the memorization. अष्टाध्यायी जगन्माता यस्य चित्तात् समुत्थिता वेदानामुपकाराय तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। शब्द ब्रह्म समाराध्य कृतवान्यो विलक्षणं सर्वाश्चर्यमिदं शास्त्रं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। येन धौता गिरः पुंसां विमलैः शब्दवारिभिः तमश्चाज्ञानजं भिन्नं तस्मै पाणिनये नमः। धन्यवाद।